I've personally also been through quite a roller coaster ride, I guess. Just I think we all have with COVID, and I also, even though I haven't personally been affected by the sickness itself, being teachers, we had to go through a lot of changes, switching to teaching online. If you've ever tried to teach a 3-year-old online, you'll know that that's a lot of fun. And so I realized that I was also needing to develop a bit more mental resilience and develop my mental well-being, just to be able to cope and to function and to move forward in this time. And this is one of the things that I focused on. And there's a lot of ways that you can increase your mental well-being. So you might be wondering, well, why gratitude? Why should this be something that I prioritize? And so first of all, the Bible actually in many, many references commands us to be grateful and to be thankful and to show gratefulness and thankfulness. And that for a lot of us is enough reason. But then the best part is that science agrees. And so I think it's always helpful when you have the biblical foundation, but then you also have the scientific evidence and the more practical, current life examples that help you to realize, okay, this is something that I should be doing. So what we're going to look at first is just some of those Bible passages. I haven't listed all of them because I do know that we don't have much time, but if you do a word search in the Bible on the word thanks, thankfulness, and it links a lot to praise as well, you'll have many, many verses that you can go back to know that this is something that God prioritizes. So here's just a few. Psalm 97 verse 12. David is saying, "Rejoice in the Lord, are you righteous, and give thanks to his holy name." In Ephesians 5 verse 4, "Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving." In Colossians, Paul tells us to continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. In 1 Timothy 2 verse 1 to 3, it says, "First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people." And then he lists sort of why, and then right at the end it says, "This is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God our Savior." So those are just a few of the references. And then next we're going to look at what science has discovered. And this has been discovered through various experiments that they've done. For example, they took a really large group of people. They divided them into 3 groups. The first group had to, every night, just write down 4 things that they were thankful for. The second group could write down anything that came into their minds. So it could be something that happened in the day, something they're upset about, could be something they're thankful for. They didn't have any specific guidelines, so they were just told to journal. And the last group didn't write anything, didn't journal at all. And so what they then did is, after a certain period of time, they look at, well, what impact is it having in these people's lives? And these are some of, well, that's just one experiment. If you go look online, you'll find many of these examples, but these are some of the benefits that group that made a habit out of writing down or being mindful of things that they're grateful for experienced. So it reduced stress, and Val also touched on how it will reduce stress. It helps you to sleep better. So I think, journaling your thankfulness with the soft tummy breathing, none of us should struggle with insomnia anymore. It improves your self-esteem. And I think that links back to what Liesel said about, instead of looking, at everyone else and what they have and what we don't have, is, you start to actually realize what you do have. And so it stops that constant comparison. It enhances empathy. It reduces aggression. it improves your psychological health, and it also improves your physical health. It improves existing relationships. I'm sure we can all understand how, those people who we already have relationships with, if we make a habit out of thanking them, even for little things, that would definitely improve those relationships. But it also helps you to develop new relationships. So this might be in the workplace, someone has done something for you and you just send them an email to say thank you, or that, creates that opportunity for them to then continue the conversation. It definitely sets you on a better footing. And then it increases your mental resilience. And I think, as I said, I know I experienced in my life that was something that I definitely needed to prioritize. The world is going through a lot of changes, and we need to be prepared to be able to still function, but to be successful in the world that we are in right now. Okay, so that's the why we should make this a priority. And now we're going to look at what can I be thankful for. And the reason I feel like this is something we need to look at is in our family, my husband, myself, our two girls, we do make a habit out of doing a reading from the Bible after supper every night. And then after we've done the reading, we write down, every person has to give something that they are thankful to God for. And then there's also an opportunity to write down something you want to ask God for. And we combine that into a family prayer. And it's actually really sad, probably, that sometimes when you're thinking, well, what can I say I'm thankful for? You sort of just sit there and it's hard to think of specifics, like what can I say thank you to God for today? Some of that is not wanting to be repetitive. Yes, you are always thankful for your home, and you're always thankful for God providing for your needs, and you're always thankful for perhaps your family. But I do think that it would be better and surely more pleasing to God if we are able to perhaps broaden that out a bit. And we've been also discussing this with my daughters, instead of just being like, thank you for the good day, we'd say, well, what about your day was good? Where did you see that God was helping your day be good? And so helping them to be more specific. So that's sort of what I thought to do is I thought, let me go and have a look in the Bible. What can we be thankful for? And, how did that apply in our lives? So what I've done is I've taken just a few biblical examples of characters in the Bible, people in the Bible, where they were thankful, where they expressed their thanks to God, and then to see, what is the general thing that they were thankful for, and how does that apply to us? All right, so one of the first examples is Hannah. And I think we all know the story of Hannah. In the Old Testament, she was not able to have children. She prayed very earnestly to God to give her a child. And she then promised God that if he did provide her with a child, she would give him back to God in service in the temple. And we know that God answered her prayer and he gave her Samuel. And in 1 Samuel 2, and I'm just going to read verse 1, but you can read her whole prayer of thanksgiving. It's from 1 to 10. Verse 1 says, "And Hannah prayed and said, my heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation." And looking at her life and what she was thankful for, I think it's definitely she was so grateful that God had answered her prayer, and she could see that he was there for her. And so that is probably one of the easiest things for us, is we need to remember to thank God when he does answer our prayers. The challenge is to remember what we asked him for, and that is where the prayer journal, like I explained, our family does, we actually write it down. So you write the date, you write what you're thankful for, you write what you're praying for, because that means the next day or even at the end of the week, you can page back and you can see, you know what, I asked God to be with me on the first day back at school. We had no idea what it was going to be like. We didn't know how the little ones were going to cope in their masks and not touching on their friends and not sharing. And so, you know, a few days later, we could go back and say, you know what, it was a good day. It was, it's beyond all expectations. The children have adapted really well, and there's not been anyone who's struggling severely. So it reminded us to then, you know, instead of that prayer request, we now need to add it to our thankfulness aspect. And so it is very helpful to write down your prayers, even if not word for word, just at least write down what you have prayed for so that you remember to give thanks for it. David is a remarkable example of being thankful and praising God. You can see there, I've jotted down some of the Psalms. Those are not even all the Psalms where it talks about giving thanks, thanksgiving, praising, rejoicing. But we can see that that's very much a recurring theme in the Psalms. And so I'm just going to touch on a few, and we will see what kind of things David gave thanks for. In Psalm 18, 48 to 49, he is saying that God delivered me from my enemies. Yes, you exalted me above those who rose against me. You rescued me from the man of violence. For this I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing to your name. Psalm 26, 6 to 7, I wash my hands in innocence and go around your altar, O Lord, proclaiming thanksgiving aloud and telling all your wondrous deeds. Psalm 30, 3 to 4, O Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name. Psalm 50, 14 to 15, offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Psalm 100, 3 to 5, know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name. For the Lord is good, his steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. Psalm 106, verse 47, save us, O Lord our God, and gather us from among the nations, that we may give thanks to your holy name and glory in your praise. I'm only going to do two more Psalms, Psalm 107, 21 to 22. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man, and let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and tell of his deeds in songs of joy. And then the last one, Psalm 136, verse 26. Actually, this sentence is repeated 3 times at the beginning of that psalm. Verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3, and verse 26 is this exact sentence. Give thanks to the God of heaven, for his steadfast love endures forever. So what I did is I read through all of these psalms, and I tried to just pick out some of the recurring themes of what David is thankful for. And I'm sure that you could go through and find even more, but these are some of the things that I picked up. David is thanking God for his faithfulness in past experiences. He's thanking God for God's protection currently. He's thanking God for his health, his mercy, his love, his goodness, his promises, and his wondrous deeds. And so I'm sure we can all, if we have to go and sit, we can list at least one example of God's faithfulness in our lives, of God's protection. We can think of our health currently. I think that is something we do thank God for every single night. At least one of the girls will say, thank you that, we are all healthy. And then we pray for pretty much everyone we know and everyone we don't know. And we know that God is merciful to us. It is only because of his mercy that we have any hope. We know that he loves us. But we need to actually also be mindful of, where do we see his love? Because if you don't keep an eye out for it, you can sometimes mistake it for coincidence, or that's just how life is. But to really be mindful of even the little things is always, it's God. Everything is God. And then David says here, to proclaim his wondrous deeds. And I think that is something that, again, I know I could be more vocal about. I was listening to another sister speak a while ago, and she said she would hate for, let me just get my head around exactly what she said. It would be terrible if someone was surprised to find out that she was a Christian. And that really stuck with me. Where we work, I know the school I work at is, they don't do any religion, but I am encouraged when people will in front of me say, we need to pray for this, or no, it's in God's hands, because that means at least through my actions there, even though I might not be allowed to proclaim it or teach it, they can tell that I'm a Christian. And I think that comes back to, speaking about when something good happens to you, give the glory to God. Say that, it's thanks to God that I was able to do this. And yeah, we don't want anyone to be surprised when they find out we are Christian. All right, then another Bible example we have is Daniel. So Daniel, we know, was steadfast in prayer. He prayed even when it wasn't allowed anymore. But the example that I've picked out here is where the king wants his wise men to not only explain his dream about the image, he wants them to first tell him what his dream was, which we know is humanly impossible. But Daniel prayed to God, and then God provided him the answer. And so I'm going to read Daniel 2, verse 19 to 23. It says, "Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, 'Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter.'" So when I was creating this, you can see that Daniel is thanking God for doing a miracle in showing him what the king had dreamed, and also explaining to him what the dream meant. Just reading through this verse another time, though, I've also picked up, he gives thanks and praise for giving him wisdom and might. So again, that is something that we can definitely apply in our lives. Any wisdom we have, any position of influence we have, that is thanks to God's work in our lives. Moving to the New Testament, we meet Anna, I'm not sure how to actually say that, and we know she was a widow who worshipped in the temple and devoted her life to worshiping God, and she met Jesus as a baby. And when she met Jesus, she praised God, and this is what it records for us in Luke 2 verse 38. "And coming up at that very hour, she began to give thanks to God and to speak of him to all who were waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem." So another thing we can be grateful for is God's redemption through Jesus. Jesus himself is an example for us of giving thanks. In Matthew, those two references, that is where he's feeding the 5,000. So I'm not going to read that. We know that he gave thanks for the food before he broke it and shared it. So that is an example of giving thanks for God's provision. And then in John 11, verse 41, is where Jesus did the miracle where he resurrected Lazarus. And in that instance, Jesus thanks God out loud that he heard his prayer. And we know that Jesus didn't need to do that because he knows that God heard him, but he did that for our benefits and for the benefit of the people who were around him. So again, an example for us to publicly thank God for hearing our prayers and for answering our prayers, as well as thanking God for his provision. The example here is food, but we know that whatever we have is provided by God. Another quite well-known example of thankfulness in the Bible is the Samaritan leper. And I'm sure we know the story where Jesus healed, was it 10 of them? Yeah, 10 lepers, and only one came back to thank him. So I'm going to read that for you, just for those who perhaps aren't as familiar with it. Luke 17, verse 11 to 19, it says, "On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, 'Jesus, Master, have mercy on us.' When he saw them, he said to them, 'Go and show yourselves to the priests.' And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, 'Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?' And he said to him, 'Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well.'" So from this, I think it is a warning to us that expressing gratitude is not a human tendency. It is something that we have to develop and practice and be mindful of doing. And hopefully, eventually, it becomes more of a habit. But if we are not careful, we might end up like the 9 lepers who are happy that they were healed, but immediately carried on with life, probably went back to their families to show them, the good news, and completely forgot to actually thank Jesus for doing this miracle. And again, so that was answered prayers that Samaritan leper was thanking God for. Another character that expresses a lot of gratefulness throughout all of his letters is Paul. And I quite enjoy reading the letters of Paul. I find that they are very relevant even now and relevant to our lives. So some of the things that he was grateful for, we're going to pick out of the following verses. So Romans 1 verse 8, he says, "First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world." In Philippians 1, 3 to 5, he says, "I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you, all making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now." 1 Thessalonians 2 verse 13 says, "And we also thank God constantly for this, that when you received the word of God, which you heard from us, you accepted it, not as the word of men, but as what it really is, the word of God, which is at work in you believers." And then 2 Thessalonians 1 to 3 says, "We ought always to give thanks to God for you, brothers, as is right, because your faith is growing abundantly, and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing." So a few of the things that I could pick out from those verses that Paul was thankful for is he's thankful for his fellow believers, but quite specifically, he's thankful for their preaching efforts. We know in some other references, he thanks them for their physical support in supplying for his needs. He's thankful for their examples of godliness and that it's encouraging others in faith. So these are all just some categories, perhaps we could call it, that we could use in order to make sure that we are, saying thanks to God, and not our thanks is not becoming repetitive. But as I said, having an attitude of gratitude is not necessarily something that we're born with. So we also need to practice this, and practice makes perfect, and the more you do it, it'll become more natural to you. So the next, the last section that we're going to look at is, how do we do this? How can I make this a habit? What are some practical ideas we can share? I'm going to share some ideas that, we've implemented and I've already actually touched on. And then I'm also very happy for us after this section to share if you have, been using a specific method that has worked for you, or you've read of something or heard of something, you're also welcome to add to this. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create an awareness of what we can be thankful for. And here are some ways that we can do that. So you can do this through meditation. This meditation doesn't need to be something, that you go sit in a special place, in a special position and play specific music. It just means being mindful. So making sure that you dedicate just a few minutes every day to say thank you. And for me, this is as soon as I wake up. I literally will, before I get out of bed, I will I first of all say thank you to God for the fact that I woke up, because that's not a given. And then I try to list at least 3 things that I am thankful for. And that really does help set the tone for the day. And that's a way of meditating, just being mindful. And you can do that at any time. You can do that in the middle of the day. You can go, to the bathroom, if that's about the only place at a school where you're going to find any peace. So I'll go hide in the bathroom and just take a few breaths and think of some things that you can be thankful for. Another idea that we've come across, and I think my parents are doing it or did do it for a year, is to have a gratitude jar. And so the idea behind this is you have a jar and perhaps some sticky notes or some slips of paper, and every day or when something specific happens, you can decide, you write that and you put it in the jar. And then say at the end of the year, you can open up the jar and you can read all of the things that you can be grateful for that happened in that year. You can make it more short term, so you could do it on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, but it just helps you to remember to actually write it down and to go back and to think about it. You could do a gratitude list. So as I mentioned in one of those experiments that they did, they asked that first group to write down just 4 things to add to that list. So you start the list at the top and you kind of carry on, but every night you add 4 things that you can be grateful for to that list. I know this is also in the States in November when they celebrate Thanksgiving. You'll see this circulating on Facebook. Everyone has, either the whole month or the week leading up to it, they will share something that they're grateful for every day, which is great. And it's even better if we can do it on a more ongoing basis. You can also journal. One of the suggestions that I also came across while creating this session is this person suggested that you take a page, you create 3 columns, one titled people, one places, one things, and then you jot down people you are grateful for. In the other one, you jot down places you're grateful for, and then things you are grateful for. And then and sometimes it just helps to categorize things. Our brain likes order, so it might help you to actually have those headings. What I've also touched on is to have the prayer journal. So this is more specifically in our gratitude toward our Father, to be able to go back and to see what we prayed for and how He has answered those prayers. And then another thing that we've definitely experienced in our lives, and I would recommend, and I would especially recommend if you have children, even young children, is to get involved in volunteer work. Because when you are doing volunteer work, it is more often than not with and for people who have less than you, and it just really highlights how you should be grateful for even the smallest things. I remember going to it was another church, and it was people, well, not another church, but another congregation. And the one boy who was there was wearing shoes, but they were not the same shoes. His left foot and his right foot, he had two different kinds of shoes on. And that wasn't because he was choosing to be funny. It was because that was what he had. And that I've never forgotten that image. And so something like being able to wear a pair of shoes is something we can be thankful for. And this is something that the reason I say that we need to get our children involved in is because we do always want to give our children the best things and, make them happy and feel loved. And very often that means, buying them gifts, making sure that they have nice clothes, nice shoes. And if we're not careful, this can lead to an attitude of entitlement, and that's not a healthy attitude to have. But when we balance that out with showing them that this is not a given, this is not something that everyone has, and you should be grateful for it through volunteer work, it does help to balance that out and help them to also develop this attitude of gratitude. As I said afterwards, I'm happy to also hear from everyone what other ways that you might have, how you create awareness in your life. And then once we have this awareness of what we can be grateful for, we need to express it. And so here's just some ways that we can express thankfulness. You can express it in person. I think this is probably the most impactful way to do it. But it's not always possible. But whenever you get a chance, just say out loud to that person, I really appreciate that you are doing this. As we spoke about in that first slide, we want to, or this is where it helps to strengthen existing relationships. Even in a marriage, I think that's something that really helps to make sure that both parties continue to feel loved and to feel valued. Don't take anything for granted. If your husband washed the dishes, say thank you for washing the dishes, even if that's something you expect them to do. If your children have helped you with something, express that to them, say thank you. It doesn't take anything away from you, but it does help them to just feel more valued. If you can't express it in person, you can write a note. You can write a letter or an email. You can send a text message. You can perform a service for that person. I think this links to maybe something, I'm not sure if this links to Leona's talk later, but try and find out how that person experiences love. Many of us perhaps have read the 5 love languages. Some people will feel loved if you perform a service for them. Some people feel loved when they receive a gift. Some people will feel loved when you give them a compliment or write them a note. So try and find out how can I give that person, make them feel valued and loved. And that is how I want to express my thankfulness to them. So that's why I mentioned to give a gift. All right. So then I'm going to end with just thanking all of you for joining with me. And I hope that this has been helpful, and I can from personal experience, and my husband actually said this to me 2 days ago. He says, you seem a lot happier. And so it works.